Hello, everyone, and welcome to the UNC Charlotte Meeting and Event Planning webinar series. My name is Crystal, and I'm the program director in the School of Professional Studies. And I'm so excited to join and help guide today's conversation. So our webinar today is Smart Planning Safe Events, what every planner needs to know. And as a result, we're diving into what really happens behind the scenes. So we'll cover the strategy, decisions, systems, and even the realities that help planners deliver successful and safe events. So before we begin our session today, I did want to go over a few housekeeping items. So as you probably heard, we are recording today's session. So at the end of our session, we will be sending out the recording via email for anybody who signed up. We also have an opportunity for audience questions. So if you wanted to ask any questions to Jen or Brittney, that is a great opportunity for you. And you can add your box or your questions to the Q&A box. If you don't see it in Zoom for you, you might have to press the More button at the end of your Zoom panel of options. You can ask your question there. You can also add it to the chat. And that chat feature should be one of the most prominent buttons for you to choose. So either way, you can also answer any questions by coming off a mute if you're feeling brave or if you want to ask a question verbally. So this is an open conversation. No slides except for this one at the beginning, just practical insight and real world examples. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our panelists today. So we have Jennifer Bishop here. Jennifer is the owner and lead event planner at J. Lee Events and our instructor for strategic event and meeting management. Jennifer has over 15 years of experience designing, managing, and bringing to life nonprofit, corporate, and community-based events throughout Charlotte. She's known for her strategic approach, strong stakeholder coordination, and ability to turn big goals into successful organized events. And we also have Brittney Derrick here. Brittney is a senior meeting planner at Mosaics Group. She's also our instructor for the event contracts and risk management class. She has produced everything from intimate gatherings to multi-day conferences for more than 1,200 attendees. She is known for her operational expertise, contract knowledge, and her talent for keeping complex events running smoothly and safely. Jennifer, Brittney, I am so excited to have you here. Thank you both for joining us today. And let's jump right in. What do you think?
Awesome. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So Jennifer, you teach our strategic event and meeting management course where planning begins long before logistics. How would you define smart planning and what does that look like in practice once an event is underway?
Yeah, so smart planning is clearly defined goals for your event. As the planning begins, it's looking at the items you want to implement to your event and ensuring they align with the overall objective and priorities for your client.
I love that. Thank you so much. And you all couldn't see it, but SMART is actually SMART, like SMART goals. So there are things we dived into in the course when it comes to smart planning. So thank you so much for explaining that a little bit. I'm going to switch over to Brittney. Brittney, you teach our event contracts and risk management course. What would you say is the most common issue you see planners overlook when it comes to managing risk from the start?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's going to sound really simple, but it's being proactive instead of reactive. I guess answering the question is what is the common issue is being reactive and not being proactive. Um, Operational risks, contract exposures, vendor dependencies, all of those things should be kind of combed through in detail prior to signing a contract. A lot of times people are just kind of look at like what's our deposit and very simple things, and then operating from the like everything will be fine, we won't have to cancel, nothing's going to go wrong, we've done this 100 times, and then that one thing happens and then you run back to your contract and you're like, shoot. So just being proactive, I think we all learned a lot with that from the pandemic. Everybody's contract language changed as it comes to force majeure and all of those different things. And even just language about a deposit versus a retainer, anything that may, from a planner side or from a supplier side, put you on the risk of losing money instead of being able to like hold on some revenue. So
Yeah, that contract is critical. That's
Mhm.
literally like, I think what every planner refers back to. And that
Absolutely.
if it's not in there, then you're kind of out of luck. So it's
Exactly.
better to be proactive, like you said, and add it ahead of time.
Yes.
All right, this question is for both of you. You both work in environments where creativity has to meet compliance. How do you balance what clients want with what's actually feasible, especially when safety, contracts, or budget realities enter the picture?
I have a little, we call it a Brittney-ism now. I stole it from my previous boss, so it was a Nathanism to start. I always say, I don't have to like it, it just has to work. Creative people, their brains think much differently than logistics people. And I respect that so much because I'm much more logistics brain than creative brain. Especially like coming from a venue side, you get used to doing things a certain way. Um, so there are people who are adverse to change and vision. I personally am willing to listen. I think that's kind of the most important thing. Um, if they're proposing something, your gut reaction might be like, nope, that doesn't work. But instead of trying to be reactive, think about what they're actually saying. What are they trying to achieve with this different vision? I've had some great examples of that at some of the past venues I've worked in, and it helps people feel like their event is unique versus what they've seen before. So yeah, I think it comes down to listening, understanding what the goal or the objective is, and trying to be solution oriented instead of not being a roadblock. So, Jen?
Just as Brittany said, I listen first. Don't interrupt the client's like train of thought because they want their ideas to be heard, and you want to see their point of view clearly as well. And then follow up with real life examples, but also solutions to keep it within compliance and budget. It's so important. I think I am kind of that weird creative logistical person, so I can kind of see both sides of it and then trying to find a solution that works for everybody. But also, as a reminder, especially we work with a lot of nonprofits, and so they have boards that are sometimes on the calls, and those folks have really great ideas because they've seen it somewhere, not understanding that like yeah, it seems like it's going to create a solution, but it's also going to increase budgets. So trying to find that balance of keeping your client happy, but also those other people who have an opinion on the call.
Yes. And I think that's where that listening comes in, but also coming with solutions and communicating like, I think that's a great idea, but this is
Mhm.
our budget, or what have we thought of doing this? I think trying to be
Mhm.
creative in your solutions
Yeah.
is
Meeting in the middle as much as you can, as
Mhm.
realistically as possible.
I love that. Thank you both. And just a reminder to our audience, you don't have to wait until the end to submit any of your questions. You can submit them throughout as something pops into your brain. We won't get to them until the end, but just wanted to remind you all, you can use that Q&A box or the chat box if you want to ask any questions throughout. So, Jennifer, I'm going to come back to you. We talked about this a little bit just a second ago. You often talk about the importance of SMART goals in planning. Can you share an example of how clear goals and key performance indicators or KPIs helped you navigate a complex event or make a tough on-the-job decision?
Yeah, absolutely. And so just for anybody who doesn't know, SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound I just wanted I had to write it down just to like make sure I got it all right, but just so anybody else on here that isn't aware. And kind of what I was just saying is people have grand ideas and just scaling those grand ideas down, because a lot of times people get on Pinterest or they see something online and they want to recreate that when that was $100,000 budget and they have a $10,000 budget. Specific, yes, sorry, Crystal, um, and everything. So just direct them to be as realistic as possible and making sure that their ideas fit the KPIs. Like sometimes these ideas, they're like, oh, I saw this. Wouldn't this be fun to do it at our event? Fun is great, activations are great, but how is that achieving your overall goals?
So kind of refocusing things like, yes, you'll take in as many inputs as they are willing to give, but let's make sure we are remaining focused. We've clearly defined our goals, and each decision we make is
Yeah, especially when it's eating into a budget and you want to make sure that those other goals are achieved. If there's money left over in the budget and we can make this fun thing happen, great. But let's focus on the importance of this event and what your main objective is.
Yeah, it comes back to the goal, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't want to spend a ton of money on flowers and not have any food. You don't want to spend a ton of money on activations and there's nowhere for people to park, right? Like it's all about like end-to-end guest experience. And so like we kind of have to be those middlemen, that middle women that have to, mitigate and make sure that the funds are allocated in a way that's going to be most important and most effective. And then, yeah, I love leftover money. That's great. Let's spend it.
Mhm.
Yes, I love that. Brittney, for many, myself included, contracts can feel intimidating, especially for newer planners. So, what are some red flags you've seen in vendor or venue agreements, and how can planners better protect themselves without overcomplicating the process?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something we talk about my team all the time. We've actually recently implemented a custom chat GPT for contract review. So our director built it out, and anybody on our team, depending on what type of contract it is, you can drop the PDF or the Word in there, and you may have to answer a few questions to give it some context, and it'll kind of like red, yellow, green light what you want to, and it will suggest like attorney reviews and things like that. Not everybody has an attorney in their back pocket and can do that. So that's my like caveat there is like ChatGPT is not an attorney and neither am I. So be cognizant of that. But it'll help you break down the legal jargon. Again, I'm not an attorney, so I don't necessarily understand legal terms and they can be really lengthy and really wordy. And so you can just get AI to kind of simplify it for you so you can understand it and then just use your knowledge, right? Like if I have to pay you 100% upfront and it's, I'm 100% at risk, like, that doesn't make sense. And then you can kind of go through and just get some suggestions on how to negotiate. Cancellation and attrition items or terms are honestly like a huge I don't want to say red flag, a red flag that I look for. Another one is indemnification clauses. We have a strict company policy that it has to always be a mutual indemnification, whether it's a hotel or a venue, whatever it is. Looking for any type of hidden fees or not necessarily undisclosed, but not specific amounts, if it just kind of leaves it open-ended. Exclusives. I always negotiate exclusives because there's always usually some sort of hotels will have exclusives with certain providers, and then that provider is charging you more than the market rate because they're giving a kickback to the hotel. And that's fine. That's how people do business. And that also gives you negotiation to leverage if you can get other quotes for that leverage. But also a lot of times I see, especially with bigger hotels, that they'll allow you to go with a third party, but you then have to pay the hotel the 20 or 25% on top of your outside AV provider because they're now losing the revenue from that kickback. So things like that are, you always want to be careful and look for. And then just like I said, I think in the beginning, like payment terms, just making sure they align with the event and they align with cancellation and attrition terms. You don't want to assume somebody's going to be honest and give you money back if you overpay with a cancellation. that, you know, you just want to make sure that you're paying based on those guidelines so that everybody's in alignment.
Mhm.
Great advice. Thank you, Brittany. And I think empowering yourself through tools like AI is a great way to go into those conversations prepared, knowing what you want to ask for and asking for it and getting it in the contract is really helpful. We actually had a question that came in through the Q&A. So I'm going to have it posed to both of you. So the question asks, the company I work for never gives me a budget, which I find makes it harder to plan things. Can you speak to the importance of a budget in event planning, even if that budget might be very high?
Absolutely. So I'm actually currently working with a client who has a high budget, but it took a while to get it. And it's hard to nail down your vendors if you don't know what your budget is. I don't want to commit to a catering number if then when I present it to the client and they go, oh, well, that was more than we wanted to spend on this. Well, I
Sticker
didn't need
shock.
that. You know, like they get sticker shock and it's like, well, I didn't want to pay this much. And now, well, what about all these other things we have to pay for? It is a waste of your time and your client's time and your vendor partner's time. Like
Mhm.
you don't want to waste because those relationships are really important. You don't want to waste their time because they're not going to put as much effort into the next proposal for you because you wasted their time before.
Mhm.
And so just kind of keep that in mind, especially when you want to create those relationships and work with a vendor over and over again. Not cutting that back and forth out makes all
Yeah.
the difference. And also you can give your best presentation to whoever you're reporting to, and be like, this is what I came up with this entire budget. This is the catering, this is the decor, or whatever those key items are.
Yeah, I mean, budgets are foundational.
Mhm.
It comes down to, like, I think about back when I used to plan weddings and people would send an inquiry, how much does it cost to have a wedding there? Well, I don't know. How much does it cost to buy a house? Well, what house are you looking at? How big is it? What neighborhood is it in? Right? Like, how much does it cost to buy a car? I don't know. Are we talking about a beater or are we talking about a Porsche? Right? Like it's gonna vary. So without a budget, you have nothing to work from. So I think kind of piggybacking off of what Jen said, if your client doesn't know what to expect, that's where your expertise comes in. And so if you, I mean, like we personally will not work with a client who doesn't have a budget. Like we can't do anything without a budget. I can't create a contract for you without a budget. I don't know how much you're supposed to pay me without a budget, right? I don't know how much work I'm doing if I don't know what work I'm doing for you. And oftentimes the sticker shock on our end is our services, like our hours, or some companies do markup. Like that becomes kind of the sticker shock. You don't think about the services. That's something, the time you're paying for the services is based on the event budget and how much work you're doing. If you, I mean, generally, I would say you do an intake call with that client, sit down, understand what their event is, and kind of line item everything. My rule of thumb is I always go high on budgets because it's a lot easier to pull back than it is to add on. So I tell my clients that out of the gate, like, hey, I'm going to budget $150 per person on food. And if we think that's too much or our guest count goes up, we can pull back. It's a lot easier to save money than it is to find money. So that is generally my rule of thumb.
One of the things that we do for our shopping center clients is we add an allowance line item. So that gives us a
Mhm.
little bit of a wiggle room. It's the same thing as Brittany's saying of like budgeting high, but that way if that we try a new DJ and they come in $100 more than we had budgeted for, we have a little bit to pull from. So we do that as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have a slush fund in every single event that I
Mhm.
do.
Yeah, that's where the planning comes in
Mhm.
case of emergency fund.
Well, and then your clients forget that that slush is there, so you do final billing and you're refunding
Yes.
them and you look like the hero. So
Good
they love to
advice.
get money back.
That's exactly it. And I think in just thinking of planning my own wedding, our wedding planner gave us the final cost of everything. And it was 50% more than we were already budgeting
Mhm.
for. And you know what? At the end of the day, she was almost exactly right with that final number. So
Mhm.
I think sticker shock is real and maybe not understanding how much things cost.
Yeah.
is also a huge thing. So I think to that person who asked the question, thank you for asking, but I think go in and advocate for yourself, advocate for what you're going to be doing as a planner, maybe do some research on how much certain things cost and say,
Yeah, that.
yes.
And
And
I
like,
will say too, just one more thing about like things being
please.
more expensive and everything.
Mhm.
Don't let your client or whoever you're reporting to be like, well, it cost this much last year. That was
Mhm.
last year's numbers. I all like as we're budgeting for some clients for next year, I consider a 15% upcharge on the vendors we had worked with previously. Maybe they haven't changed their costs, but at least we're covered for that.
Thank you. Yep, that's another thing. I think, again, it kind of is coming down to communication, kind of having an open and honest conversation about the realities of planning, the costs, and how, like Brittney said, a budget is foundational, because if
Mhm.
you don't know what your goal or your maximum is,
Mhm.
even if they say, oh, there's no budget, there actually is a budget in
Always,
there. You'll
always.
find it, and you don't want to find it the hard way.
Mhm.
All right, y'all. Gonna come back to both of you again when it comes to like realities of the job or different scenarios. So, in your current roles, what are the first things you assess when walking into a new venue or site for the first time?
So I look for flow and any pain points for the flow. I'm considering what the client's objectives are for the event, if and how that can be accomplished within the space. A lot of spaces are just an empty space for you to fill and kind of work yourself. That's not always the case, but a client may want a cocktail hour and then roll into the program. Do they have a space for a cocktail hour? So then it's not disruptive for setup. Are they wanting breakout rooms and all of those kind of things? um, so those are the things I really look for, is kind of walking through the event with the client and asking questions as we think about those things. What is registration going to look like? Is it going to
Mhm.
back up? If it's raining and it backs up, are our attendees going to be out in the rain while they're waiting to check in? How do we fix that if that were the case? That happened to us a few years ago. It was just a tsunami outside. That particular venue doesn't have an awning. And so somebody had a pop-up tent. I don't remember who, but we put a pop-up tent outside the front doors. So,
I am always looking for, I think flow is super important. Like you need to understand, it's gonna vary by event, but like if you're having a cocktail hour and then people are sitting down, is there enough space in the venue to do both of those things? People don't want a cocktail around the dinner table, right? Like you need to be able to move. If you are planning to be outside, great, but what if it rains? Can you tent it? If you can't tent it and everyone has to come inside, do you have a separate space to do that? I think also people make their common mistake is you look at a capacity chart from a hotel or a venue that says, oh, I can sit 200 people banquet style. Well, that's maxed out. That is not room for a dance floor. That is not room for a stage. That is not room for a panelist table or whatever it is. So whatever that number is on the paper is probably 10 to 25% less that, depending on what your actual setup needs are. The two other things that I'm always looking at are storage and kitchen access. I think venues have gotten a lot better when they're planning and redesigning to make sure that kitchens are in an appropriate space. But it has absolutely happened where you have to walk through the entire event floor to bring food out, and it's just unsightly. So because when the dirty dishes go back, you're then going back through all of the guests as well. So just understanding like from that flow and that access piece of it, and storage is a hot commodity in this industry. I don't know a single venue anywhere in the world that has enough storage for not only their own stuff, but anything you're bringing in, especially if it's a large production and you've got AV crates or things like that. Sometimes you got to put it back on the truck, and that's a bummer, but that's the reality of stuff. So if there's any venues that have extra storage, we love it and we will use every inch of it.
and I will also say, parking. Sometimes parking is a huge thing for some of our clients, depending on, their demographic of guest. So those are also things that, we think about when we're we're arriving at a venue. Like you're not just starting to think about the flow of the event when you walk in the front door. It's from the point that you parked your car,
Right.
and
Mhm.
whether you're walking to a lobby of like a hotel, or if you're walking through the parking lot, or is there overflow parking across the street? Are we going to need signage and those kind of things as well?
Mhm.
Thank you both. I appreciate that thorough answer. I'm going to go back to Brittney now. Brittney, how do you handle difficult vendor or stakeholder conversations when risk or compliance issues come up?
I mean, this is gonna kind of go back to my like be proactive and not reactive, but don't delay. Hard conversations are not fun, but the more you put them off, the harder they are to resolve or rectify. And it's for me, it's kind of a gut check. If something feels like it's off, go ahead and address it right away, get some clarity, clear the air. 9 out of 10 times my gut is right. So I'm glad I talked about it. On the 10% that it's wrong, it helps build trust with your partners and your vendors. I think a dear friend of mine in the industry, she's kind of the godmother of hospitality here in Charlotte. I went to her, I go to her often anytime I have to have hard conversations with colleagues or other people. And her most beautiful piece of advice is ask for help. Go into that conversation. Don't talk about you have a problem. Go into the conversation and say, "Hey, I need some help." And then that kind of changes the tone of the conversation, and it builds that trust and lets the other person know you value their insight, which has helped me not just in business but or not just professionally but personally as well. I think the other thing is explain it. Don't over explain yourself, but lead, like if you're looking for clarity, lead with clarity. Explain why you are looking to change this or have concerns about it, whether it's, safety, liability, guest experience, budget, whatever it is. And always try to kind of leave the conversation with a path forward. And that's going to vary, but yeah, that's usually how I approach it.
Thank you, Brittany. And actually, we've had a few other questions come in. I know I said we'd save them until the end, but I'm like, seems like people, it's funny. We had two questions come in that are very similar, and then another one come in about budget. So I think we're going to dive into more of like the financial side of things. So one of the questions is, I have started an independent event planning company. How much should I charge? I have 10 plus years of experience, but I don't want to charge too much in the beginning or too little because I know my value. I've read that 10 to 15% of the budget is typical when a budget is given. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna vary. I think I could give you a range. I think low end, maybe $50 an hour is probably realistic. High end, some agencies may charge $250 an hour. But from an agency side, that's covering all of their overhead, right? So that's covering all of the laptops they're purchasing, possibly an office building, right? Like, so it's not just for your individual. So if you're an individual contractor charging $250 an hour, like all the power to you. I don't know that you can justify that cost. Unless you're like a celebrity planner and like that's awesome. But I think like the 10 to 15% makes a lot of sense. I mean, truthfully, it's something that it's not that I struggle with in terms of what do I charge. We charge hourly. And so sometimes figuring out what the hours are is a little bit of the struggle, especially if it's a new client. Um, create a checklist for yourself. Run through, is this a new client? Do they have a budget? Have they done this event before? If anything is new or starting from scratch, it's going to cost you more time because you're having to create and guide and kind of literally start from nothing, right? If they've done it before, if they have someone on their team who is a planner and you're just supporting them, right? Like anything that's going to help kind of shave some time off of what you need to do, then your hours can probably have a little bit less cushion. It's hard to say that the 10 to 15% works because you may have an event with a very large budget and you're handling a small piece of it. So is it justifiable to charge 10 to 15% of a budget when you're maybe touching 25% of the program? I don't know, right? So there's so many varying things in there, but I think you have the right idea, rule of thumb, that 10 to 15% is usually a good starting place. And I mean, I'd say average $75 to $100 an hour is usually what I see from a owner planner perspective, not like an event support perspective.
Mhm.
Jen, you own your business. You
Yeah, so our hourly rate's a little bit high. It's not in the 250 range. What I do is I charge a flat rate for my services as the owner of the business, and then my support, if they are the lead and I'm not taking the lead on it, that's a different charge because their information is valuable and the work they do is valuable. But I am paying, as Brittney said, I'm paying for all the overhead in terms of the programs that we use. I'm also touching it in terms of like the contract and things like that. So I pay I pay them a flat rate, but when I'm charging the client, there's a little bit of overhead added to that to cover the fees, including paying them because I'm paying for the platform that pays them
Right.
and paying for their tax forms to be sent to them. So there's a little bit of difference in that, again, coming from the business owner side of it. And then I was going to piggyback off something you said, Brittney, and it just, oh, talking about hours. But we do
Mhm.
charge hourly rates. So I sit down and this may be the tedious way to do it, but I feel like it gives our clients a special touch on their events. I don't say that all events are X amount. I go in, I have a conversation with those clients, and then I go through those notes and I go, okay, these are all the things that they wanted. How much time is this going to take us? And I separate out the pre-event planning from the day of planning. And that's how I kind of calculate how much to charge per event.
Mhm.
And sometimes if it is a new client, like Brittany's saying, that's what I was going to piggyback off of. Um, there is a lot more work to go into it, and then we have clients who do the same events every single year. We're pretty much using the same vendors every year, so our time on that event is condensed the next year because it is really a copy and paste
Mhm.
of the event.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you both. Kind of in that same vein, somebody had a question that wanted to go back to budgets. Their question is, what are a few ways to get the client to give a budget professionally, maybe to ask
Oh,
for the budget professionally?
I know the person who asked this, and so
I
I know it's
know.
coming from
Hi.
hi. I know this is coming from a catering perspective, and I
Mhm.
think the best way to kind of reply and say, in the kindest way, in the most professional way, the best, the way I can give you the best proposal is if I understand what your budget is. Even if it's a range, say, hey,
Mhm.
what's your range? That way you're not presenting lobster mac and cheese, you're presenting
Mhm.
just mac and cheese. Or you're not presenting, steak bites, you're presenting sliders, whatever that the food cost may be for a different item. And one person's idea of a luxury item may be different once they see how much that luxury item may cost. So just, I think asking for a range and saying, I can't give you the best proposal without understanding what you're willing to spend.
Yeah, I think that is a perfect answer. Piggybacking off of that from a different perspective as somebody who is often um, reaching out. A lot of times our clients, we provide them competitive offers. We give them a variety of different things. So we may RFP and get 3 different proposals. Um, it is helpful for me to have a foundation and understand what it even costs for you to be at the table, right? I may have a client who says, "Oh, I want to work with this catering company. I've heard about them, but I know that they don't have the budget for it." But if I don't know that, I just need something to have the conversation. So, um, kind of going back to what Jen said about asking for proposals and not having a budget, and then people spin their wheels and they put all this hard work into something for you and it ends up being a giant waste of your time, that costs you money. We don't want you to do that. So having some sort of a one pager sounds so cheap, but something that gives them an idea of this is what a baseline hors d'oeuvre reception looks like for 2 hours for 100 people with just bite size or pass, and then, you know, whatever it is in your specialty, this is what it costs like for kind of the next bump up, and this is what it costs like for a plated, and giving them that range. That I think helps them understand what are the realistic costs for this, and they can decide, I want to work with you regardless, but I can only afford option one, or oh yeah, this is exactly what I thought, option three sounds great, let's get to planning. So I think kind of a lot of people, you don't know what you don't know, so they have to have a place to start. So if you can kind of be that guide and you are that expert, give them that information up front, and then from there you have something foundational to kind of enforce that conversation of like, I can't do anything more for you until you tell me how much money you have to spend. So
And I will say from a business perspective, if we get an inquiry and I'm reading it and it sounds like, I'll just say baby shower, for example, it's a
mhm,
small baby shower. I am very upfront what our minimum is. Sometimes we are flexible with that if it's a previous client and we know they're easy to work with and it's going to be a quick turnaround. But that's an established relationship. If it is a
mhm,
new client and they just want help putting tablecloths and florals on the table, that's where we are as a business and our size is just not worth our time. And I
mhm,
don't want to waste my time taking a call, putting a proposal together. And I did that early on in my business. I know you asked that later, like what things that I've learned. I was like, I will take all the calls, I will take all the business. And then you put all this time into a proposal and they're like, oh, that was more than what I wanted to spend. Or you just get ghosted. So if you get an inquiry in and you see that it's a 12-person lunch at a park and your typical clients are a lawyer's office for
mhm,
50 people, they're probably not looking to spend the same amount of money. And so just being
mhm,
upfront and what you're willing to leave the house for. And I know that's a
mhm,
privileged thing to say of like what paychecks I'm willing to take and what paychecks I'm not. But at this point in my business, that's just the reality of where we are.
mhm,
I appreciate that. And I think it sounds, from what I'm hearing you say, it sounds like you were a little experimental, you were learning along the way, but as you learned more through your experience, you're like, no, actually, I need to focus on this or
mhm.
prioritize this.
Yeah.
And not to pitch our next webinar, but I keep thinking, I'm like, this would actually really be a great opportunity to, for those who ask those questions who are just starting out, that webinar is going to focus on pitching presentations, as like pitching your services or pitching you as a planner, as well as communicating and starting your own business. So I know you both, Brittney and Jen, have great advice to offer there. And then once we continue the conversation with our other instructors, I think that'll help maybe take shape for those of you who aren't sure where to start. Sounds like you've got some great ideas for like resources to assemble, what to share with
Mhm,
clients or your bosses. And then that next webinar is potentially a good opportunity
mhm.
to figure out how am I gonna convince this person of this? How am I going to communicate this? So thank you all for those questions. Please keep them coming in. I do have, since we're kind of in the vein of like advice or professional insight, I have another question for both of you, either of you. For planners who are newer to the field, what's one foundational system or checklist they should have in place before planning any event?
I think Jen and I are probably in the same realm, but it's create samples, create templates.
Mhm.
I live off of a template at work, spreadsheet queen. I love it. And I think they but adapt, like they change all the time. Every event is not the same. Certain things are not gonna be applicable to events, and you may have to build in a whole new tab for other ones. But having something to work from instead of having to start from scratch every time is a game changer. Um, I know it's the university, so I'm mindful of plugging AI, but like work smarter, not harder. Um, there's, you know, and honestly, like even on just searching on Google or going on Etsy, like there's people who create all kinds of checklists and forms and things like that who may share just a Canva file with you, and then you can adapt it to your branding and things like that. If you're not a creative, don't spin your wheels doing it. There's templates that exist. Pay someone $10 for that template and then modify it, to your brand or your organization. Those are things that save me, and they save you so much time, which is honestly like where most of your money is spent. So
Yeah. And I'll sing Brittany's praises a little bit. We have a client that we've been working on with years. We've been using the same budget, but we're working with another organization on this, and there's just been some missed deadlines and things on their part. And so Brittany found a way to take the spreadsheet that we were already using with them and then make checklist for them. And so now that has become the baseline sample for the next year's event. And I'm actually going to implement it into, because we have 2 clients with this particular partner, and we're going to implement it into that client as well. And yeah, I will say from a business owner perspective, and we all learn as we go, make those samples now, and then all you're doing is adjusting later. It is harder to work on the business when you're working with clients. Like, it is so much harder to find the time to do those things when you have emails coming in and you have clients calling and you have all these meetings. Do it as early on as you can, and I really would say try to carve as much time as you can during a week to be like, I'm going to work on these things. I'm going to make these adjustments. And if you find that you added something new to your run of show or your budget, go put it back into that sample right away. So you're not like, oh, what was that thing we did? And then you're trying to search it for whatever client that was you added.
Great advice. Lay the foundation early and then just continue tweaking or editing it as time and experience goes along. So I know we've had questions about budgets. I'm going to ask you again, both of you, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone learning to manage contracts or budgets for the first time?
No, that's a specific question, but events vary so much. So, but I know there was a lot of questions about, I have clients who don't give me budgets, and everybody has a budget. Everybody is willing to place a value on something, and that value varies. So I get this from my husband. He's the most question asking person I've ever met in my life. And it's taught me a lot of things. But ask questions, be curious, seek clarity, look for understanding, right? I think I said earlier, have the conversation up front, don't delay. Be honest. I think, you are the expert and people are paying you to be the expert. Be honest. Make sure your delivery is professional and kind. But sometimes clients need a reality check, and kind of like what Jen said, referring to last year's price or that time your daughter got married 10 years ago is not going to be relevant to our conversation today. Even, and the landscape is constantly changing. I was having to have conversations with clients recently about flights. People, the rule of thumb is, oh, buy your flight 6 weeks out, and they're like, oh, prices will go down amid the shutdown and the TSA cuts and all the things. And I was like, that is old. That has changed, right? Like, we can get into a whole conversation about retirement rates and backfilling positions and just how all of that changes, and how it's not just like one day to the next day. But you are that expert, so be confident in that, and don't be afraid to link resources. Sign up for newsletters. I get emails constantly, which are annoying, but I will read the headlines, and then when I have to have the conversation, I know that I just saw that news article from a trusted source, and I can link it to a client so that they know I have got somebody backing what I'm saying. And just, yeah, don't delay. So
And I would say don't take vague answers, that kind of, and it goes back to the budget thing. Like, a window is good. Like, I have a client, they've given me a budget and they're like, we couldn't get X more if necessary. So, that's always good to know. It's that allowance again, but vague answers are not going to give them the results that they need. And if you also don't know, if you get vague goals for the event, you can't know if the event was a success for them.
Well stated. Well stated. Um, Switching gears a little bit, when it comes to stressful situations. How do each of you stay calm and solution oriented when things get stressful? And what can newer planners learn from that mindset?
I will say, having a place, a safe person to vent to, whether it is a quick text message. I actually did this on a call yesterday with my team. Um, but having a place to vent that is not the client and or the vendor that you're dealing with. You need to look calm, collected. You know what you're talking about, you know your stuff, and you do, and remind yourself of that. Sometimes we just need that, like, I'm going to step away, I'm going to breathe this through. And it also gives you a chance to like clear your thoughts and come up with
Mhm.
the right answer or several right answers to present to them. Because
Mhm.
sometimes you're going to have a difficult client that may not like your first answer. And you either have to have a reason to back that up or say,
Mhm.
okay, if that doesn't work for you, what about this? But have a safe person, whether they're on site with you or if you just need to be like, WTF, I will explain later, but I just needed that moment to like blow a gasket. And you collect yourself, you breathe, and you walk up to them and act like you had it all together the whole time.
Yes. Like-minded friends are great.
Mhm.
I vent to my husband about event stuff all the time, and he looks at me like I'm crazy because he doesn't understand what that means to me. So having Jen to talk to who gets it immediately and has my back is a game changer. I think Jen just kind of touched on this, but I always love like the duck analogy where you look like calm and cool and collected on top of the water, but underneath you're like, like crazy. Your feet are going, you're paddling like crazy. That is really important to a client. Maintaining, if you panic, they panic. It's kind of like when your kids fall, and if you don't like immediately like, oh no, then like usually they're just like, oh, actually I'm okay, that didn't even hurt. Um, it, Clients are like that, right? Like if they're freaking out and you're freaking out, everyone's freaking out, and it's for no reason. Nothing's gonna get done. So, just focusing on what you can do and not what you can't do. So not necessarily focusing on the problem, but focusing on the solution is really important. And back to that honesty piece, if it's in the moment, this is a little different, but in the planning process, I am not afraid to say, I'm not sure, but I'll find out. I don't know, but let me look into that, right? I don't pretend to know everything, and I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you do. I don't think you build trust with people when you pretend to know everything. Don't get me wrong, I have to spitball all the time. But if I'm not sure and I want to be confident in my answer, I will say, let me look into that for you and come back to them with a solution.
And I will back that up with saying like Brittney has a excellent background in working hotels and travel events. And so we've had clients who have asked questions about travel, and I'm like, I will get back to you. Brittney is the expert on that. And I will also kind of say too, this is where it's important to have really good relationships within the industry, because if you do
Mhm.
find yourself in a pickle, that you can be like, I don't have that resource on me right now, but let me text X, Y, and Z and see if they can help me. Especially if you have the time, if something
Mhm.
doesn't show up, and it's a pivotal part of your event, being able to text somebody or make a phone call and say, hey, this vendor didn't show, or this broke, or
Mhm.
whatever the case may be, and relying on those people. And that's why you want to have those good relationships with your vendors, and you don't
Absolutely.
yank them around about proposals and things like that, because they will
Absolutely.
come through for you, especially if you've created that relationship.
Mhm.
Sorry, I was having trouble coming off of mute. Well said. Just want to open it up to our audience. Thank you both for all of those questions and answers. I haven't seen any questions come in, but if anybody in the audience would like to ask anything, that chat box is open, as is the Q&A box. And if you do want to come off mute and ask a question, you certainly can. Until then, we'll wait for any of them to potentially come in. What's one small change every planner can make this week to improve the safety or efficiency of their next event?
Hmm. If you're not using AI, you should be using AI. I know Brittany has said that, and Brittany's the one who got me on board. I kind of questioned it. I don't use it willy-nilly. Let me just say, like, a lot of people assume AI is doing all the thinking for you. And that's not how you want to use the tool. The tool is meant to expand your words. I don't even know if that's the right way to say it, but I write my emails out. I write my thoughts out, and then I'm asking it to make it a little bit more clear. I can be very wordy because I want to sound overly polite in emails sometimes. And so I add too much fluff to it. And emails don't always need the fluff. So it edits those things for me. Putting my notes into from a call and putting it into
Mhm.
ChatGPT and getting it to clear everything up. Because a lot of times when I'm on a call with the client, and especially if it's a new client and new event, they are brain dumping
Yeah.
everything. And I am just fiercely like, da da da. Sometimes I don't finish a thought because they had gone on to the next thought, but it organizes everything into one space where I may have missed that even though I wrote it, I may miss later that they said, oh, they
Mhm.
wanted, I don't know, a certain thing. And I was like, I overlooked it because I was so worried about all the notes I took about the venue.
Yeah, I love that. My gosh, I record all of my meetings now. Even if I don't record them, I transcribe them. And if we use Teams at my job, so I have a Teams premium, and at the end of my meeting, it gives me a recap of my meeting and all of my action items. And it's not perfect, so you still have to human edit it and make sure things are correct and accurate. But it saves me so much time, and then I can focus on my call with the client in real time instead of trying to take notes. My gosh, I cannot do that at the same time. So but to answer mine, I um assumption checks. If you're operating on an assumption, assumptions are like the root of all mistakes. So if you are uncertain about something, get clarity on it. If you're operating on, well, that's what we did last time, double check with your client, right? And it may be an opportunity to expand, it may be an opportunity to grow or change and move them towards something different instead of just like repeating it and it becoming stale or mundane. So
And
yeah.
I'm a huge proponent of using AI as a tool like that. I don't know what I would do without it, truly. Like I pull up my email, pull up my calendar, there's Chat GPT right next to it. And it is a tool. It can be used for gosh, so many things. Jen, I do the same thing. I'm very verbose in my communication. And I'm like, you know what? I'm communicating with somebody, like somebody who just needs these details. Can you
Mhm.
edit? Yeah, there's so many ways that you can use it. We are coming down to our last few minutes. It's crazy how quickly time has flown here. Um, we do have one question in the chat, or the Q&A, I'm sorry. So that question from our audience is, how do you deal with a client who has a department which handles some internal events, but somehow creeps into tasks and events that have been assigned to you?
I love this question because this happens to me all the time. Clearly defined roles, clearly defined objectives. Um, I again, depending on the perspective here, but it happens frequently where people will ask me questions and I'm like, no, no, so and so has access to this. As a reminder, this is what I'm doing. If you would like for me to do this, we can just discuss our contract, whatever it is, and kind of like give them a subtle reminder of like, no, no, that is not on my plate. You are not paying me for that. Now, of course, that's within reason. If it's something that I can do and it's helpful and it builds trust or, creates safety or efficiency, somebody's had a bad week, whatever it is, we're talking about within reason. But if somebody's trying to take advantage, nip that in the bud immediately. Like, do not avoid it, bring it up right away. And yeah, just have that clear division of responsibilities.
Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate you answering that. One final question, and then we'll wrap things up. So this is to both of you. If attendees remember one key takeaway from today's conversation, what should it be?
Having goals in place ensures you're going to be successful. Um, Not only for your client's event, like their event is successful, but what they hired you to do, you're successful. So you can say, we completed XYZ, you were able to get XYZ from happening during your event.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the risk management side, right? So for me, like contracts shouldn't be scary. Use tools, use resources, and that might even be reaching out to a fellow planner or reaching out to a fellow vendor and saying, hey, what, just curious, what do you do on this? That's again, going back to what Jen said, partnerships. We like to call them frienders are super important. Charlotte is really good about community over competition, at least in our world. Can't speak for all areas and whatnot, but in the event world in Charlotte, it is very community over competition, and everyone is willing to help each other and support each other. And I kind of always operate from there's enough business to go around. People often are able to bail each other out. That's happened to me before. Somebody gets sick, especially with these solopreneurs who are running their own business, and your kid is sick and you can't do something. Being able to call on somebody that you know and trust and can deliver and support each other is invaluable. You can't put a price on that. I'm getting on a tangent here. But it's those things are having those conversations, thinking through those things, being proactive is intended to help you feel confident and be empowered in what you're doing as a professional, and not about being restrictive or trying to like control a client. It's about kind of flexing your expertise, showing that you're thinking ahead, you're doing predictive work for them, and that there is value in you.
Mhm.
Very well said. Thank you both. And thank you all to our attendees. Thank you, Brittney and Jennifer, for sharing your insights as well as practical examples and expertise. For those of you who joined live, appreciate you being here. Did want to share some quick information. I know I mentioned it a little earlier in the conversation, but we are the Meeting and Event Planning Certificate program. If you like what you heard from Jennifer and Brittney and want to continue that conversation and honestly start building up your network in the events world, our Meeting and Event Planning Certificate starts in March. It'll be here before we know it. I know with the holidays and all that going on, it seems like March is a long way away, but it'll be here in the blink of an eye. So for those who are interested, I have a QR code on the screen. You can scan that to be taken to our program page for more information. We also have our final webinar in the webinar series coming up next month. So I want to invite you all to please join us if you are able. Even if you're not able to join us live, we'll be recording that again and sharing it out with anybody who signed up to attend. So that session is titled Pitch, Plan, Prosper, Communication and Entrepreneurship in Events. And that is on December 10th from 2 to 3 p.m. I don't think we intended, Jennifer and Brittney, to get to this point where it's like communication is what it kind of comes down to in event planning, but it worked out nicely that that's kind of our final webinar in the series. And we will be joined during that session by two amazing instructors in our program, as well as two amazing women. So Carla Eustache teaches our Foundations of Event Planning Entrepreneurship class. Heidi Hansen teaches communication and sales strategies for event professionals. And in that hour, we'll be having a great conversation about communicating your value, building your brand, and laying the foundation for a sustainable event planning business. And last but not least, I will be hosting an information session. So if you are interested in learning more about our Meeting and Event Planning Certificate, I will be hosting that in January, January 22nd. It is on a Thursday and it's in the evening because that's when our live online classes are for the program. So that is from 6 to 7 p.m. It's a great opportunity to explore our new flexible program structure, where you can now enroll in individual courses. So looks like my colleague Francisca was kind enough to share sign up links for all of that in our chat. So please take a moment if you are interested to sign up and attend. and really appreciate your time. And last but not least, for the information session, how could I forget a discount? Who doesn't love a discount? One lucky attendee of our information session in January will receive a 10% discount off of our full certificate program for attending live. So just wanted to give that brief plug, but really appreciate your time, Brittney and Jennifer. It's so great to chat with you. I honestly, as we were talking, I wish it could have gone on longer because I could learn and talk to you all for hours and hours. But thank you again. Thank you again to all of our attendees, and I hope everybody has a wonderful day.
It was a delight. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.